Sure, happy to be here. I'm putting in the chat another article, which was based on our experience with the Nabisco strike in Portland by our co-chair Laura Wadlin, who's also a Bread and Roses member, and goes into actually quite a bit more detail than my article, which you may or may not have read. I'm glad to see that Noelle is here and who was very active in the strike support work in Portland and can fill in gaps and make her analysis. Ann and Salem. Okay. Did you say there was another person from Portland on this call, Noelle?
No, just Oregon.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right. So I'd like to start out by saying that if you read the Willamette Week article, which featured me, it's quite overblown, and and then the way my presentation was set up as, the outside agitator. It's not really true. As Jason suggested, I've been active in the labor movement in Portland for 40 years, and I have a relationship with the business agent of the Bakers Union, going back to some postal struggles that he was directly involved with in the neighborhood. I live in the neighborhood where the plant, the Nabisco plant is, so knew some of the people who were on strike. It's the historically Black neighborhood, albino neighborhood of Portland, and there are generations of folks working in that plant. Some of them working there, about half about working there for 20 years or more. And so when I was out on the strike line, started going out on the strike line immediately when the strike was called, I started, talking with people about the neighborhood and, discovering that we knew each. So there was a connection there, not, so in the sense, so it's really not right to call me an outside agitator. And my ability to organize solidarity rallies, which included clergy and politicians and union leaders, also, is a result of having decades of activity in Portland, showing up for other people's struggles so that we had relationships and there was trust there. And also I've been the delegate to the Northwest Oregon Labor Council, the AFL-CIO Central Labor Council for the 4-county area for that 40 years. So I know a lot of the labor leadership, despite the fact that we've had our conflicts and differences over the years, we're still in the same movement. And it was the Portland situation with this particular strike had some unique character qualities to it, which made it easy for community organizations to intervene and be supportive and have a big impact. And well, first of all, let me just say that, well, the main aspect of that is that the Bakers didn't have any plan for community support or solidarity. And so, when I went up to Cameron on the first day and said, so what do y'all need? He said, well, just come out to the line, bring water, food. And, I said, well, are you expecting scabs to cross? Well, I don't know. And, well, so are you planning any kind of community rallies, or is there going to be a boycott? I don't know. So immediately we had an analysis in the DSA labor working group that this was probably going to be a protracted struggle, because Nabisco, Mondelez, this huge multinational corporation, which with billions of bucks to throw around, and in the process of outsourcing to Mexico, and has been for years. And, several lines of production at that plant had been outsourced to Mexico. So the, we really had to create a crisis for the company to be able to even protect the wages, hours, working conditions that the workers had, not to mention protect their very jobs, which certainly are not any safer now than they were before the strike, from being outsourced to Mexico. Um, but one of the particularly unique pieces of this puzzle was that the plant is on a major thoroughfare, a 4-lane boulevard, where there's just tons of traffic all day and night. It's right in an industrial. It's in the edge of a neighborhood and next to an industrial area, so there's lots of truck traffic and just lots of honking of by support. And so that lifted the spirits of the strikers. The strikers had, as I said, most of them had these long relationships, which had been particularly cemented with the pandemic and working these 12-hour days and 7-day weeks, and just the stress of um, that whole experience. And the what we the way that we pulled together over time, the solidarity, community solidarity, was first of all to organize a community rally on the Saturday after the Tuesday walkout, which I pulled together and involved clergy and politicians and union leaders from other unions, but in particular, after walking the line for 4 days and getting to know people, realizing and asking people their stories, and I also happened to uh, be a host in a local community radio station, a labor radio show, and so I did interviews with people for the local labor radio show. Um, then asking people if they would tell their story at the rally, and so really centering the strikers and telling them that we were praising them, basically saying what you're doing is really bold and courageous. And it's so important for the rest of us, because we don't go on strike. We don't know how to strike, and you're showing us how, and you're using the most powerful weapon that the working class has, and you're showing us. And it's so important for other people to see and to hear how you had the courage to do this. And when you when you got people, it was just amazing the way the people that were more courageous got up and talked first, and the stories were so powerful. It's so different to have a rally that centers the rank and file workers, than when you have the leadership giving their rah rah. And what was really powerful, and this happened increasingly over doing these weekly solidarity rallies, was strikers would start to break down telling their stories, and others would come up from the crowd and put their arms around them, and what was really powerful for the larger labor movement and for DSA, and I say that this was a transformative strike in that sense, that not only were the strikers themselves transformed by the sense of appreciation from the community, and a sense that they were part of this larger movement that they hadn't felt before, but for the rest of the community to see that courage and the love that the workers had for each other, which was multiracial. I mean, this is a predominantly Black workforce, largely women, but a huge number of Latinx and Asian and white and young and old workers. I mean, they were two. Sharon, who had been there 53 years, and John, who had been there 48 years. Sharon had been there for the last strike, 1969. People would look and say, Sharon, I learned how to survive in this plant from Sharon. And people would, this kind of appreciation for each other, um, and solidarity was so evident. And so much of, I think, well, for me and the work that I'm trying to do in DSA and in building our organization, um, was moved so much by this experience, because all these, young people who were just new to socialism and maybe, had certainly not never been on strike, never been close to a strike, had maybe never even been close to a union, but were thrown into were able to experience up close, and personal, a multiracial solidarity in a a class warfare situation, and it unified the different caucuses in action within DSA. We have really our largest caucus is the Libertarian Socialist Caucus, the Anarchist Caucus, which is like butts heads with the Marxists and the communists, and uh, but there was this unity in action that happened through not just the solidarity rallies, but we also did boycott brigades, where we'd go out to take groups of people out to the stores and do leafleting, boycott Nabisco, but also doing inside guerrilla actions inside the stores. And then there was this whole set of interfering with production, interfering with the scabs, interfering with the supply, trucks and trains, and both leaving and coming to the plant. And Noel can tell you more about that. Um, that really engaged a lot of the people that had been involved in the street fighting with cops and during the Black Lives Matter uprising, and a lot of the folks in connected with the LSC. That was their territory, and they liked that stuff. And it was really it was escalating, and it was quite effective over time. And we can talk specifically about some of that, but let me see. I don't want to go too much longer, but to just say, that our relationship, DSA's relationship to the larger labor movement, has grown by leaps and bounds because of this strike. We were able to, everybody was kind of caught flat-footed and like wondering what's happening here. And usually what happens with strikes in our town is like they're one day, they're like demonstration strikes rather than really trying to interrupt production. This was a 40-day strike. And, some of us were anticipating that, but most weren't. But so we ended up with, the president of the Oregon AFL-CIO and the speaker of the House of Representatives, all these people, county chair, wanting to come and speak in our rallies. And now with the IATSE strike prep, of course they've got a TA, but they may still go on strike. We were asked specifically. DSA was approached by the leadership of the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stagehands to organize community solidarity for their strike. And we've been support the Oregon Federation of Nurses and Health Professionals, who are Kaiser about to go on strike, reached out to DSA and specifically and said, we want you to organize community solidarity for our strike. So this is really different. I mean, I could barely mention DSA at the Labor Council, prior to this strike. And now every time I'm at Labor Council, I'm talking DSA and people are asking questions. So that's a big step forward. And also, as I said, the transformation of a number of these strike leaders to a place of when we were leading the the what is the chant? Organize and fight, workers of the world unite. The the strikers were, right there and saying, okay, we're ready. What's the next? And so they were speaking at the nurses rally, and have been part of the solidarity preparation for the nurses strike. So there's a really some really important um, advances, I think, despite the fact that the strike was, in my opinion, they didn't gain anything. In fact, they lost some. Um, but in terms of the material conditions of their work, Portland voted against the tentative agreement, but the rest of the country had less was not as strong, and people were crossing the line. There was only 2 people that crossed the line in Portland. Um, but still, it was because of the confidence and cohesion and the competence, the combativeness, the class consciousness that was accomplished. I think it was a real step forward for not the strikers, but the working class movement in Portland in general. So I'll just stop there and let people get into the discussion or ask questions or talk about what we're planning for the Kaiser strike.